Most people think loneliness is an emotion. It isn't, at least not to your brain. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every person you've ever known has vanished. Your phone never rings, no messages appear, no conversations, no eye contact, no voices, just silence. At first it might sound peaceful, a chance to finally be alone with your thoughts, but your brain wouldn't experience it that way. Within hours, it would begin treating the situation as something far more serious than loneliness. It would treat it as a survival crisis. That sounds dramatic, but for almost all of human history, being completely alone was one of the most dangerous situations a person could find themselves in. Humans didn't evolve as solitary hunters like tigers or leopards. We evolved in groups. Groups found food together, protected each other, raised children together, warned each other about predators. If you became separated from your tribe 10,000 years ago, it usually wasn't an inconvenience. It was often a death sentence. The people who survived were the ones whose brains treated isolation as an emergency, and that ancient survival system is still running inside your head today. Your brain doesn't know you're sitting safely inside an apartment with grocery stores, emergency services, and the internet. It responds the same way it always has. Something is wrong. Find your people immediately. The first thing it does is activate your stress response. Your body begins releasing cortisol, the hormone responsible for keeping you alert during dangerous situations. Your heart beats a little faster, your muscles stay tense, your attention becomes unusually sensitive to sounds and movement around you. This state is useful if you're being chased through a forest. It's much less useful when you're sitting alone in a quiet room, because now there's nothing to fight, nothing to run from. So your brain starts looking inward instead. Thoughts become louder, small worries become bigger ones. Conversations from weeks ago replay over and over in your mind. You begin analyzing things you normally would have forgotten within minutes. This is why loneliness often comes with overthinking. Your brain has entered survival mode, and in survival mode, uncertainty becomes impossible to ignore. Researchers have found that prolonged social isolation increases vigilance toward potential threats. In other words, your brain becomes biased toward looking for danger even when none exists. It's like turning the sensitivity of a smoke detector all the way up. Eventually, it starts reacting to burnt toast the same way it would react to a house fire. The same thing begins happening inside your mind. Neutral events start feeling negative. Ambiguous situations start feeling personal. Silence starts feeling uncomfortable. Not because you've become weaker, because your brain believes it's protecting you. But here's where things become far more unsettling. Stress isn't the most dangerous consequence of isolation. It's only the first warning sign. Leave the human brain without meaningful connection for long enough. And it doesn't just change the way you feel. It begins changing the way you think. The longer your brain stays isolated, the stranger things become. Not because you're losing your mind, because your mind was never designed to operate without other minds around it. Think about something as simple as telling a joke. If everyone laughs, you know it landed. If nobody laughs, you instantly adjust. The same thing happens every day in thousands of tiny ways. A confused look tells you to explain yourself. A smile tells you you're understood. A disagreement forces you to reconsider an opinion. Without realizing it, you're constantly using other people to calibrate your own thoughts. Psychologists sometimes call this social reality testing. It's one of the invisible jobs human connection performs every single day. Now imagine removing that feedback completely. No conversations, no reactions, no one to tell you that you're overthinking, no one to tell you that you're probably fine. Eventually, your brain has nobody left to compare itself against. And that's where reality starts becoming flexible. A harmless thought that would normally disappear after a 5-minute conversation can now stay in your head for days. Small worries grow larger. Minor doubts become convictions. The brain begins trusting its own assumptions simply because there is nothing left to challenge them. Then something even stranger can happen. The brain starts creating the stimulation it isn't receiving. People kept in extreme isolation often report hearing footsteps, voices calling their names, knocking on doors that were never touched. Some describe having full conversations with imaginary people. Others begin seeing flashes of movement out of the corner of their eye. These aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of a brain desperately trying to solve a problem it was never built to face. The human brain expects input. When that input disappears for long enough, it sometimes starts generating its own. At the same time, the brain itself begins changing. Deep inside your brain sits a region called the amygdala. Think of it as your internal alarm system. Its job is to detect danger and prepare your body to respond. During prolonged isolation, that alarm becomes increasingly sensitive. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, planning, and self-control, becomes less active. Imagine trying to drive a car where the accelerator keeps getting stronger while the brakes slowly wear away. That's essentially what's happening. Emotion begins overpowering logic. Fear becomes louder than reason. Impulses become harder to control. Over time, this doesn't just affect the way you think. It affects the way you experience the world. Time begins to feel strange. Without conversations, routines, meetings, or shared experiences marking the day, hours blur together. People in prolonged isolation often struggle to estimate whether minutes, hours, or even entire days have passed. Sleep starts breaking down too. Some people sleep constantly, others barely sleep at all. Headaches become common, heart palpitations appear without warning, even ordinary sounds or bright lights can begin feeling overwhelming. The body is responding exactly as if it's trapped inside a crisis that never ends. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that none of this requires violence. It doesn't require starvation, it doesn't require physical injury. Sometimes, all it takes is removing other people, which raises a disturbing question. If simply taking away human connection can reshape the brain this dramatically, what happens to the people forced to live like this for weeks, months, or even years? That answer already exists, and we've been studying it for decades. Fortunately, very few people will ever experience complete social isolation. But there is one place where researchers have been able to observe what happens when human connection is taken away almost entirely: solitary confinement. In many prisons around the world, inmates have spent 22 to 24 hours a day alone inside small cells for weeks, months, and sometimes even years. No meaningful conversations, no shared meals, no ordinary social interaction, just silence. The effects are remarkably consistent. Many people who leave prolonged solitary confinement describe intense anxiety in situations that never used to bother them. Crowded rooms become overwhelming. Simple conversations feel exhausting. Some struggle to make eye contact. Others become deeply suspicious of people around them. Many continue experiencing symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress long after their isolation ends. What's striking isn't just how quickly the brain adapts to isolation. It's how slowly it learns to trust people again afterward. Your brain doesn't instantly recognize that you're safe. It remembers what it spent months preparing for. And that's because the brain is incredibly good at adaptation. Whatever environment you spend enough time in eventually becomes your normal. If that environment is filled with meaningful relationships, your brain becomes better at trust, empathy, and emotional regulation. If that environment is isolation, your brain adapts to that instead. The good news is that adaptation works both ways. Researchers studying neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself throughout life, have found that meaningful social connection can begin reversing many of the changes caused by chronic isolation. Regular conversations, shared experiences, supportive relationships, even small moments of genuine connection help calm the brain's threat detection system and strengthen the networks involved in emotional regulation and decision-making. In other words, human connection isn't just something that feels good. It's something your brain actively depends on to function the way it was designed to, which changes the way we should think about loneliness. Maybe loneliness isn't simply the absence of people. Maybe it's the brain's way of telling us that one of its most essential biological needs isn't being met. Just like hunger reminds you to eat, and thirst reminds you to drink, loneliness reminds you to reconnect. Not because you're weak, not because you're broken, because for hundreds of thousands of years, another human being wasn't just companionship. They were part of your survival. And perhaps that's the strangest thing of all. The organ that allowed us to build civilizations, as some invent language, Chinese, land on the moon, and create the modern world, still works best when it knows it isn't facing that world alone. If this changed the way you think about your own brain, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore the hidden psychology behind the thoughts, behaviors, and instincts that quietly shape our lives.